Good morning, everybody. My name is Raj Samurai. I'm here on behalf of the CFA presenting this online presentation entitled Fire Safety Essentials. I'll be taking you on this journey of fire safety essentials over the next 1 to 1.5 hours. As is traditional, I would like to begin by our acknowledgement of country. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are hosting this meeting today and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and also any other Aboriginal people that are here today. I'd like to get the technology thing out of the way right to the onset. This is integral to our presentation and for good engagement. So you'll notice that this is a webinar format. Thank you for joining us in this webinar. And the way that you can communicate with me as your host is via the chat function or by polls. So the way to activate the chat function is to hover your mouse over the chat icon that appears on your taskbar. And you will find that you have the ability then to enter chat. You print out or you type out exactly what you would like to say to me. A question, a response, or any other comment that you wish to make during the course of this presentation. The other function that we have is what we call a polling function. And we will launch a couple of polls during the duration of this session, just to get a feel or an idea of exactly what your opinions are regarding some of the poll questions that we have. I must say to you also that this presentation is being recorded. You're not being recorded because we can't actually see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. The recording of this presentation is purely for training and personal information and for me to improve my delivery style. You are free to ask questions at any point through the chat function as mentioned earlier. What I would like to do now is commence the presentation by asking ourselves, well, what are we here to learn? What are the learnings that we are trying to take away here? This is not going to be death by PowerPoint. This is going to be a highly engaging session regarding active discussion around the key determining factors when it comes to fire safety and your safety in the event of a bad fire day. We will be talking about local fire risks. This presentation is personalised to the area of Simpson. And I must really emphasise this is a very basic fire safety essentials presentation. Entry level is what we like to say. There is that discussion around what to expect from a fire, and we'll be going into the details of that very shortly. We'll also talk about the communication thread. How do you know if there's a fire in your locality? Where do you go to? There'll be time spent talking about planning and decision making. This is integral to fire safety and your personal safety. Of course, the best laid plans can fail. And when they do fail, what are your survival options? What's plan B? What's plan C? And what's plan D, should you get caught out? Let's jump straight into it and talk about understanding our local fire risks. I might just get us to, first of all, just practice our chat function and let me know via the chat function exactly where you're joining us from. I will monitor the chat at my end here. So feel free to hover your mouse over the chat icon and allow yourself to put in any comments telling you where you're from. I can tell from here that in our participants, we only have 2 other attendees, and they are Bree Jones and Emily Hill. I'm quite free and open to your conversations, both Bree and Emily. Feel free to enter information into the chat bar so that I can ascertain exactly where you're from and how this is actually relevant to you in this regard. Another key feature of the Fire Safety Essentials is the ability for us to adopt the polling mechanism. So what I'm going to do now is launch a poll This will appear on your screen. Oh, thank you very much for that. I've just had a chat from Emily. She's from Geelong. Thank you very much, and thanks for jumping into the session. And Bree Jones is joining us from the Simpson area. Welcome, Bree. I'm glad to have you guys on board. So what I'm going to do now is launch a poll, okay? This poll is really for me to ascertain some dynamics around the audience, how long you actually lived in the local area, Simpson in your case, and Geelong for you, Emily. How long have you been to a CFA meeting before? And how do you actually find out about this session? So I'll just launch that polling now. So if you'd like to offer your responses to each of those 3 questions, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. So how long have you lived in the area? Have you been to a CFA meeting before? And how do you actually find out about this session? Well, thank you for your responses. I'm now going to end the polling and share those results with you. So as you can see, you've kind of been in the locality for between 1 and 5 years. And one person's been in the area for longer than 5 years, 10 years. You've both had an equal share of being to CFA meetings. One person has and one person has not in this case. And you found out about this through social media. So that's it, the power of social media. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'll stop sharing those results now. And what you might want to do on your end is just cross out or close your share results as well. I'll just jump over here a bit. So, okay, this Fire Safety Essentials program is tailored towards the people in the Simpson area and the surrounds. Simpson has a VFRR, and I'll apologise for the acronyms right from the onset, the Victorian Fire Risk Register. So Simpson has a reading of 2. This is quite high, with 1 being the highest. So this is why this particular Fire Safety Essentials online presentation is of particular relevance and value, because Simpson is regarded as a high grass fire risk area. Simpson itself is located in the municipality of Corangamite. It's part of what we call the Hettlesbury settlement, and is one of the most productive dairy centres in Australia. Well, there you go. The town was named after H.L. Simpson, the first chairman of the Soldier Settlement Commission. This town has a population of 569. One thing that I do know for sure, having done a number of these presentations, is that particularly face-to-face presentations, is the tremendous amount of community spirit and cohesion that exists within our communities. And this is the strength of our communities. It's that ability for us all to come together on a bad event day, a bad fire day perhaps, or any other natural disaster, to be able to join forces and act collectively for a good outcome. And fire management is no different to that. This is the underlying core strength of the Country Fire Association, the CFA. We very much build our strong links based on our connection to community. So, and that's part of why you guys are here today. Moving on, when we talk about understanding our local risk, we want to really designate the fact that Australia, as your screen shows, is actually, or in Victoria in particular, is probably one of the most bush-prone parts of the world. We often talk about California and the US. Yes, we are on par, if not more so. This particular slide shows the many different ranges of landscapes across our fine continent. We have grassland, we have bushland, we have mountainous forest area, and we also, of course, have farmland. Fire has been present in the Australian continent for millions of years and has been significant in shaping much of the landscape. Many fires have been started by lightning, and we know that from recent fire events. Our ancestors or Aboriginal people used fire for many thousands of years to what we call care for country. These fires were a tool that encouraged the growth and extent of grassland. It also helped to enhance hunting. It reduced levels of fuel and kept vegetation from becoming dense and hard to walk through, so allowed easy access. In actual fact, and just for your information, there's very few records of bushfire in the early stages of European settlement, and records only really started in about 1851. Now, what I'm going to do now, if my mouse allows me to, there you go. I might just close this a second. Okay, so what you're viewing now is a map showing the different weather districts in our region in the southwest of Victoria. Now, each fire district has its own level of fire risk. That's the take-home message from this. Another thing that we need to take into consideration is what we call the seasonal outlook. So what's seasonal outlook? Seasonal outlook describes the overall trend of what is happening in your weather district. The fire season this year is very different to last year. We're in what we currently call a La Nina weather event. So what this actually means is that we're expected to, there's a possible reduction in the risk of prolonged fire activity across most of Victoria compared to this time last year. Let's just go into that in a bit more detail. So when we talk about seasonal outlook, this is what we mean. What we're trying to envisage here is that there's going to be increased rainfall across much of Australia. There's going to be cooler daytime temperatures, that's south of the tropics, and warmer overnight temperatures in the north. The last La Nina event appeared during the winter of 2017-2018, and this was followed by its counterpart, El Nina, which happened in 2018-2019. So you can see there's a cyclical pattern between these two weather trends: La Nina, where we're now, and El Nina, which will happen probably next year, I would imagine. What does this mean to Simpson? Well, Simpson is in a part of Victoria that has experienced slightly above average rainfall and has above average soil moisture. So more rainfall, more moisture in the soil. There's enough moisture to make the grass grow well. But remember also, particularly on a day like today, with 30 plus degree days predicted today, that fuel load, that grass will dry or cure very, very quickly. And when it does dry or cure, we tend to find that there is a potential for ignition and a potential for fast-moving grass fires. The take-home message from this particular slide is that, like every season, there is a need to be prepared for the fire that could happen due to this high load. Let's spend a couple of minutes just talking about the local vegetation. I might just open the chat function again here and just ask yourselves, well, what type of landscape do you think you have in your area? Particularly in the case of Bree, who is from Simpson. So I'll just monitor my chat to see what's going on here. So Bree, in your regards, what do you think, or what type of landscape do you think you have in your area? And of course, Emily, if you've got knowledge of this as well, this would be great to know. What do you perceive as the local landscape in the Simpson area? Okay, so what I might do at this stage then is talk to you and let you know that the predominant fuel around Simpson, is grass, with with large areas of bush and bush along roadsides. So this is an area at risk from fast-moving grass fires, with likely ember attack from nearby bush to the north, northwest, and east. So We'll talk more about ember attack very shortly, but fair to say that with our current weather pattern, we will get more rapid grass growth. And thanks for that, Brie. Grassy, I live on the edge of the Otway Forest. Absolutely. When we have such conditions, there is the potential for fast-moving grass fires. So when we try and put this into context, what does this all mean? It means that open grassland is susceptible to the wind. The wind is the driving force. The wind drives fire direction. A change of wind equals a change of fire direction. When we throw in that the topography, by that we mean the undulations, the slopes and the rises within our locality, and Simpson has a fair bit of that, a fair bit of hilly terrain. We have to remember, as a rule of thumb, that fires travel faster going uphill than going downhill. And this is as a result of what we call the radiant heat and also the convective heat element. We're not going to get technical, but just remember, fires will travel faster uphill than downhill. In actual fact, for every 10 degrees increase in slope, a fire will double in speed. What I might do now is move on to the next slide and talk about local risks. In this regard, I'm going to open up our next poll. And this poll really is looking at what do you consider to be, let me just get back to this poll, finish that, relaunch polling, continue, right, cross this one out. Just bear with me 1 second while I get to the next poll. And this poll is really talking about understanding your local fire risks in the area. Now, I've launched this poll, and what we're asking is, it's a multiple choice response in this particular question. So what are some of the things that could make your local area a high risk area? So tick away as many of those that you think will impact and make your area a high risk. So I might give you another 10 or 15 seconds on answering this particular one. I mean, we all know that areas that do have a high tourists can be a potential risk, because often a lot of our tourists tend not to be as savvy when it comes to fire behaviour and fire knowledge. We've already spoken about the speed of grass fires, the fact that they travel much faster uphill than downhill. We've spoken about the fact that grass fires can be sparked by embers, and I'll come to embers very shortly. And of course, the high roadside fuel load. Now, you've all answered that. I'll end the polling there, share those results with you. And as you can see, right across the board, you have indicated that all of them, in actual fact, are considerably important when it comes to local risk. Maybe not so much with the high tourists or the speed of grass fires in your case, but certainly the other considerations of the windy roads, etc., make for an interesting conversation when it comes to understanding fire behaviour and your local risks. So I'm going to stop sharing those results. And again, you can close your particular box at your end. So moving on from local risks. When we consider the resources at hand, we've got the Simpson Brigade. They're a hard-working community. They work 24/7 in a volunteer capacity to help the community. And what I like to do at this stage is ask this sort of very rhetorical question around the ability of your brigade to service you on a bad fire day. So we've got a Simpson with a population of just under 570 individuals and approximately 243 properties or dwellings. Couple that with the resource of having 2 tankers and 1 ultralight in the brigade. It doesn't take much to understand that, hey, it's going to be a tough gig, isn't it? To get a tanker to be on your drive in the event of a bad fire day is going to be a challenging situation to try and do. And basically, the key messages that we've tried to do up until now is to say to you, well, we've got a basic understanding of fire behavior. We understand some of the elements around fire. We've got an understanding around various risks to us and the reinforcing the need to have a plan. And we'll come, and that will be the constant thing throughout this presentation will be the P word, which is plan and preparation. Having a level of preparedness is essential because 2 tankers and 1 ultralight will not be capable, the brigade may be actually split in other directions, having to man or tackle fires in other areas. You cannot expect the brigade resources to be on your drive to help you fight your fire on a bad fire day. That's the bottom line. We would like for you to really take a keen interest in your personal safety and have that plan. Be ready, be prepared. You know, I'm an ex-Cub Scout, and one of the clear things that was always drilled into us as Cubs was preparation is the key, that level of preparedness. I'm passionate about community safety and I'm passionate about fire safety. And when we talk about risk mitigation, being out of harm's way, this is a classic example. Why put yourself in harm's way when you know that you can be out of that situation and in a safe environment? And this will become clearer as we go through our presentation. What to expect from a fire? What is fire behaviour all about? We all know that Victoria's had a lot of fires. You know, last summer we saw huge fires in multiple parts of the state. What I want to do now is really get underneath the skin of fire. And I'm about to show you, and I make no apologies for this, I'm about to show you some really graphic animations of fire behaviour. They are designed to shock. So a bit of a warning before I show the next 2 animations. The first one is actually on ember attack. Is if in any way you feel disturbed or impacted by this, then please look away. And at the end, the first one is probably about a minute or 2 minutes long. We'll come back to the conversation, but feel free to look away. But they do carry a very important message, and I think that will become evident as I start to show you the video. So without further ado, this particular presentation is entitled Ember Attack, and I'm about to play it now.
During a bushfire, embers will reach your home long before the flames do. Ember attacks are the most common way that houses catch fire. Embers are burning leaves, twigs and pieces of bark. They help the bushfire spread by starting spot fires ahead of the main fire front. Short-distance ember attacks happen when leaves and small pieces of bark are blown from burning trees. The intense shower of sparks that forms fills the air with hot, burning embers, which will land on nearby vegetation and properties. The hot embers can easily land and get into your clothes and burn your skin, eyes and airways. Small fires will start all around you and quickly become uncontrollable. The resulting chaos creates confusion as the fire seems to come from many directions, meaning it will be difficult to make good decisions about your safety. The experience will be physically exhausting and emotionally traumatic. Long-distance ember attack is caused by large bushfires that generate intense heat. As the hot air rises, it forms a column of smoke that sucks in air like a vacuum, increasing the intensity of the fire. The updraft in the column lifts embers, like large pieces of burning ribbon bark, hundreds of metres into the air, where strong winds can carry them many kilometres beyond the fire front. On Black Saturday, embers travelled more than 30 kilometres ahead of the main fire. When these embers land, they often start fires where leaves naturally accumulate, like in gutters, doorways and garden beds. So, while you might think you're safe when a bushfire is far away, embers can fall from the sky and land around your home long before you even know there's a fire. But remember, your home isn't the only thing under threat during an ember attack. By the time you realise the danger, it might be too late as escape routes become jammed. Embers can also start fires on roads and block them completely, making late evacuation dangerous or impossible. That's why leaving early, before a fire starts, is always your safest option.
Do you know, I've watched that animation many times, and every time it gets me. Every time I realise the intensity of an ember attack, I realise the indiscriminate nature of embers and how they can travel a long way and rest in someone's spouting or that pile of leaves that are meaning to rake up, and then can be the source of fire. They travel ahead of the fire front. Ember attack is by far the biggest cause of property loss. And although we're focusing on ember attack, we've also got to talk about direct flame impact as well. This is the concept of dry fuel on your property, allowing a running grass fire to burn right up to your house. You know, it's that continuity of fuel. And there is a saying that if you have fuel to your doorstep, you will have fire to your doorstep. So how do we mitigate that? How do we mitigate that risk? We put in brakes. We put in a brake in that continuity of fuel. It might be a drive, it might be a gravel pathway. And there's a number of other things that you can do that we can talk to you about at the end of the presentation through the resources that are available, through the links that we're going to provide you. Keeping your home safe, keeping your home fire ready is part of that challenge. It will save your home. It's the potential to save your home. We often say that vegetation looks to burn. And, you know, our sort of Aboriginal ancestors used this for a long time in terms of the germination of seeds, etc. Burning is good if done well, if done appropriately. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen just for 1 second while I find you a video, another animation that I would like to play. And this particular animation is on radiant heat. Now, radiant heat itself, let's close that down a second. Radiant heat itself is an invisible force, okay? It's a force, again, a force of nature. It's invisible, and therefore, because it can't be seen, people become very complacent. Again, this video is quite graphic. Please look away if you feel that it could in any way hurt your sensitivity or if you're sensitive to it. So I'm going to share that right now.
Victoria is one of the most bushfire-prone parts of the world. Every summer, bushfires threaten properties and lives. But did you know it's not the flames that kill most bushfire victims? No, it's the radiant heat. Most victims die from the effects of radiant heat long before they're reached by the flames. Radiant heat is what you feel when you sit next to a campfire. If a campfire heats up to 2 kilowatts per square metre, you'll feel that it's too hot and will want to move back from the fire. If you don't, this amount of radiant heat is enough to cause burns and blisters in as little as 40 seconds. At 12 kilowatts, it can cause some materials like dry timber to ignite. A bushfire can reach 100 kilowatts, and the effects can be truly catastrophic. For humans, radiant heat can cause burns from 100 meters away and cause a dangerous increase in body temperature. Radiant heat can cause the rapid onset of heat stroke. Heat stroke damages your brain, meaning you won't be able to concentrate to make good decisions as the fire arrives. Other impacts include severe damage of internal organs and death. There are some things you can do if you're caught in a fire. Cover your skin with long-sleeved natural fibre clothing, like wool. It's also useful to know that radiant heat only travels in straight lines and can't bend around corners. So, sheltering behind or inside solid structures may help protect you. But be aware, radiant heat will travel straight through glass. The best defense against radiant heat is a simple one. If you're not anywhere near a bushfire, its radiant heat can't hurt you. Leaving early is always your safest option.
Do you know, it's quite amazing, isn't it? And again, no apologies for the graphic, descriptive, and quite scary nature of that presentation, of that animation. It is designed to shock because fire is a clear and present danger. You know, it's a force of Mother Nature that is uncontrollable, that has a mind of its own, that is a force that will allow even the most accomplished firefighter a high degree of stress and agitation, purely because of its unpredictable nature, driven by the wind, affected by, I guess, by the topography, the environment, more than anything else. One thing that the CFA does do is that following a bad event day, often interviews are conducted with people that have survived fires. And this is just, I put this slide in deliberately to give you some indication of how some rather accomplished firefighters or members of the public felt. And this is the emotional energy that they had regarding their decision to stay and fight a fire. So what does all this mean to you? You know, the first sort of 2/3 of this presentation have looked at different scenarios when it comes to fire. And we've tried to peel back some of those layers to give you a better understanding of fire behaviour and your ability to be able to fight fires. We've spoken about the aggressive and unpredictable nature of the ember attack, the radiant heat, that invisible force that travels horizontally and that can only be blocked if you're hiding behind a solid object, not glass, mind you. We've spoken about, you know, the fact that roads may get blocked, your exit routes are impacted. We've spoken about your locality of Simpson and how the terrain does not lend itself to good access and exit routes. We've spoken about the high fuel load in our paddocks and roadside, etc. The bottom line here is that your ability to make good decisions will be impacted by many factors. I'm going to launch another poll now, and if you could respond to this poll, I'd be most grateful. This particular poll is entitled, What to Expect from a Fire. If you could, I'll just launch that poll now. If you could offer your responses to this question, which is, what do you think would impact your ability to make good decisions? And again, multiple choice, so as many of those that you think will affect your ability. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now and share those results with you. Now, as you can see, stress by far is the highest factor that would affect. You know, as human beings, we don't have the cognitive capacity to deal with stressful situations, okay? Some of us will deal with high stress load better than others, but the majority, especially if they're not prepared and not ready for an event, will react in a very stress-burdened way. They will be non-coordinated, they will be fractured, they will make hasty decisions. And the Black Saturday fires bared evidence for this, when people who'd been inside their homes with their curtains closed and the air conditioning on, watching the latest Netflix movie, those people who left it too late and then suddenly tried to make a run for it, they were the fatalities. They were the ones that didn't make it because they were stress overloaded. The situation was changing so rapidly around them. things didn't go to plan. They didn't have enough time. And of course, there was a huge communication breakdown. So all in all, preparation, that dreaded P word, has to be the key. I'll stop sharing those results. And again, if you can cross out of your end as well, that'd be really good. The CFA is passionate about planning and being ready, being fire ready. Fire Safety Essentials gives people the tools and the know-how through the resources that we offer at the end of the presentation to have a plan and stick to that plan. The plan is available as a leaving early template that all family members can sit around the table and discuss openly and discuss their options of, hey, on a certain weather event today, on a bad fire day, or it might be even at the lower end of that spectrum, we are going to leave, and we are going to leave early. This is going to be our emergency bag, and this is what it's going to contain. The children may or may not be at school, the pets may or may not be around, but we're going to make sure we've got provisions for all of them. It's about tackling every single element of leaving and thinking it through critically. So the next level of understanding that we need to have is, how do you know if there is a fire? Okay, and through the chat function, again, how do you know if there's a fire in your locality? Where do you go to? Where are you looking? So I'll just open my chat here. So by way of the chat, just let me know. How do you know if there's a fire in your neighbourhood? Okay, what I might do at this stage, because, yeah, no, it's not happening for me. That's okay, no problem. I might just go on to share something else with you that I think is going to be valuable. And that's our understanding around the fire danger rating, or the FDR. What does this FDR mean? Where is it found? So most people would have seen this perhaps on the television. You sometimes see it on social media as well. It's a common place where a lot of advertising and promotion is done of the fire danger rating. Some of us will see it on a sign on the road, usually near sort of CFA fire stations and sheds. But there is a bit of confusion around this. I'd just like to launch another poll here at this stage, just to ask you, and thank you for the other people that have now joined. And this poll is, how well do you know if there is a fire? And it asks a couple of questions relating to the fire danger rating. And the first question is, well, what does the fire danger rating mean? Is it one of two things? Is it an indicator of how likely a fire will start? Or is it B? It's an indicator of how bad a fire would be if one were to start. And thanks for your response, Bree, there around the Vic Emergency app. That's fantastic. That's the go-to that we would use to ascertain fire behaviour in our area. And the beauty with the Vic Emergency app is that we can actually set the radius. So we can either look in our locality or further afield. Particularly useful if we're travelling and we can see then, well, hey, there's a fire in that region, therefore I won't go that way. Hey, I know those roads aren't blocked, I'll go that way. So yes, the Vic Emergency app is a great communication tool. So we've kind of got a split there around, first of all, the fire danger rating. I'll end the polling and share those results. There is a question at the bottom there. Does anyone know how many severe or extreme days have happened in the Southwest in the last 5 years? Yes, you've all answered that one. I'm going to end the polling now, share those results with you all. So as you can clearly see, we've got a split there of 50-50 as to what the fire danger rating actually means. The actual correct response to what the fire danger rating means is response B, which is, it's an indicator of how bad the fire would be if one was to start. Okay, how hard would it be to put that fire out if it started? That's what the FDR actually tells us. And for the second response, the answer is 0. We've had no code red days in the Southwest region in the last 5 years. However, we have had in excess of 4 of the severe extreme days in the Southwest in the last 5 years. So that just gives you some idea of some of the fire activity in the Southwest over the last 5 years. The underlying, and I'll stop sharing those results, and if you can close your box as well, that'd be great. The take-home message from the fire danger rating in this regard is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a severe, extreme, or for that matter, a code red day for it to be a bad fire day. We know that fire behavior is governed by lots of factors, okay? And there's complex algorithms that are used to define what a total fire ban day, which is different to the fire danger rating. But there is a science and a precise science that says, okay, well, today's going to be a severe day. What we as members of the public need to take into consideration is what's the trigger going to be for us to take that emergency bag and leave our homes. That's the number one consideration. Use this as a guide, as an understanding of, well, okay, it could be a very high day today. I know what that means. And I might just go into the next slide to explain to you exactly what we mean by the various elements of that. So severe means that you expect hot, dry, and possibly windy conditions. That's what we mean by severe, at the bottom end of the spectrum there, severe. And if a fire should start on a severe day, it may be uncontrollable. Moving on, extreme. Expect extremely hot, dry, and windy conditions. And if a fire started on an extreme day, it will probably be uncontrollable, unpredictable, and very fast moving. In this instance, spot fires will start, move quickly, and will come from many different directions. Remember how we spoke about ember attack and spot fires ahead of the fire front? This is what we mean by spotting the front of a fire. And ultimately, a code red day. These are the worst conditions. Our Australian homes are not designed for code red conditions. The safest place to be on a code red day is as far away as possible, particularly as far away from high-risk bush-prone fire areas. The trick here, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is to use your understanding of severe, extreme, and code red, to use these as triggers to be away from your home, perhaps leaving on the day before or early in the morning of a severe day or extreme day. And certainly you shouldn't be there on a code red day. The CFA advocate for early departure, leave early, be out of harm's way. We live in a world of, I call it infobesity, yeah? Information overload. We have too much. Not only do we have the traditional portals of our newspaper, radio, and television, these days we have the dynamics or the digital dynamics of social media. We would like to think that this information is evidence-based and right up to date and up to speed, and it might even be that conversation that you have in a cafe with someone or while you're walking the dog around the park. We like to call these very much informal means of information gathering, informal, okay? Now, what I would like to propose is this slide here, which is, and Bree mentioned this earlier, these are what we call our formal means of communication. These are evidence-based, real-time fire behavior advice. And of particular relevance, as mentioned earlier, is the Vic Emergency app. The Vic Emergency app gives you real-time information about fire behavior. And we suggest that all community members have this as a part of their mobile phone. It's an app that's installed on their mobile phone. It's the go-to for fire behavior information. When we talk about fires and fire behavior, it's actually, to be caught in a fire is a very scary, it's a terrifying process. And I'm hoping that some of the early animations gave you a feel of that. It's a dark place, it's a noisy place, and most of all, it's a very disorientating place as well. Often you find that in the event of a bad fire day, or if you're caught in a situation where there's fires around you, communications will often go down. When communications go down, it's crucial that you have a battery-operated radio as part of your emergency bag. And that's what we say in local news at the top, and there's the battery-operated radio at the front there. A battery-operated radio could be your lifeline, your link to the outside world, away from your current dark world. And that would be your lifeline to say, local ABC radio will tell you, this is what's happening. These are the roads that are blocked. This is stay put services. It'll give you up-to-date intel that's crucial for you to make an informed decision about your personal safety. So yes, we do have the informal means of communication, but ideally the formal means of communication are by far the most effective. When we talk about the Vic Emergency app, and for that matter, sort of advice through our CFA internet as well, you tend to find there's a triage process that's offered when it comes to the advice, watch and act warnings, and of course also the emergency warning. They're color-coded, and it's a system that has been in place for quite some time now. It's a widely recognized system to keep the information, to keep the public informed of the process. When an advice warning is just that, an incident is occurring in the locality or has occurred in the locality, it'll provide access information and also for you to monitor conditions. It can also be used as a notification that activity in the area has subsided and is no longer a danger to you. So it's advice. By its very name, by its very nature, it's advice only. Next in this triage, we have watch and act. This is indicating that an emergency is developing in the locality near to you, and you need to take action now to protect yourself and others. This is the point where you put into place your action plan, your fire plan. You may even do it at the advice stage, just to be out of harm's way, and that would be great. Next comes the emergency warning. As by its nature and as by its color, you are in imminent danger. And you need to take action or you will be impacted. You need to take action. When we talk about risk mitigation, why put yourself in that stage? Why wait until the emergency warning comes out? You should be long gone, perhaps at the advice stage. And the bottom of the slide there indicates do not wait for a warning. The next stage of this triage process is preparing or evacuation, which is prepare to evacuate or evacuate now. An evacuation is recommended or procedures are in place to evacuate. That's what the evacuation sign means. Generally, after the fire event, you'll get community information, a newsletter usually updating the communities affected by the emergency. This community information can also be used as a notification that an incident has occurred, but there is no threat to community. Now, what I'm going to do now is go through a bit of a scenario with you, bringing together all the elements that we've discussed so far. And the way that I'm going to do that is by way of showing you this timeline and the importance of the advice warnings. Now, this is quite critical to where we're going. Okay, so let's do this as best as we can. So here we have the fire starts at one end of the spectrum. You're happily in your home, some sort of 18, 19 minutes away. You're watching television. There's no indication. You don't know that the fire's there at the moment or approaching. You tend to find that maybe 5 or so minutes later, a fire is reported to 000. This is the point at which our local brigade will be notified. And they will be notified at that point, at which point 10 minutes have passed and the fire is getting closer to your home. Okay, so the fire service is actually behind the fire at this stage because of the fire being reported about 5 minutes down the track. And this is when the advice message is released, maybe about 15 minutes after the fire has actually started, by which time the fire, dependent on conditions, dependent on topography, etc., all the things that we've spoken about, dependent on fuel load, dependent on wind direction, is growing and getting closer to your home, and you're oblivious to this until that advice message comes. But of course, after 20 minutes have passed, the fire has actually passed through your house and now well on its way down the track. So can you see what's happened here? The advice message has come, and the updated emergency warning, which didn't even go through the watch and act at all, has been updated to an emergency warning. But of course, the fire has continued to grow. So the take-home message from this particular quite simplified process for demonstration only is that don't wait for the warnings. Don't wait for that advice message. And this is probably a pretty good segue to the next part of my presentation, which is, in order for you to be on top of your game, for you to be fire savvy, you need to use your senses. And there's that old adage that says, if something doesn't feel right, there's a high likelihood that it's not right, that gut feeling. And a lot of us that live on land have got this intuitive sense. We just know the sky is not the right color. We can visualize, we can see smoke, we can see embers. We can hear trees falling, or we can hear the sound of fire or some perception of fire. And of course, we can smell smoke. When we talk about planning and decision making, and this is quite fundamental, particularly if we want to stay ahead of the game, because we've already described up until now that there are risks in our area. We know what it's like now to experience a fire from what we've spoken about already. We know how to stay informed because we've got all these apps and messaging systems. We've also got our CFA brigade and our captain, who's always going to be very accessible and helpful in these regards. What I'm going to do now, in terms of that planning and decision making, is take you through another hypothetical example, okay? We've got an understanding about fire. We know what extreme means, don't we? We know that extreme generally means it's hot and it's dry, and it possibly is windy as well. Now, if you want to just take 2 seconds and close your eyes, I'm going to read out a bit of a scenario to you. And this is the first part of this sort of pretend exercise. Pretend it may be, but it's not too far from what actually could happen in reality. So bear that in mind as well. It's 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning when you look outside and you can see that it's already hot and windy. Remember, it's an extreme day. The morning news is reporting that today it's actually going to be an extreme fire danger rating. Remember the FDR, extreme. So you jump in your car to shoot off to work. As you're driving into work, you can see small branches falling from trees and feel the heat coming through the glass windows. Remember, radiant heat? That's what it is. It's about lunchtime and you overhear people talking about a fire that started near your home in Simpson. You jump on the Vic Emergency app, which is the wise thing to do, to find out whereabouts, where exactly is this fire? And you can see that it started a short distance from your house. So what you do then is you jump into your car and you start heading home to make sure that everything is okay. But as you get closer to your home, you can see that the road is blocked by police. You wind down your window and they advise you that it's not safe to go into the area as the fire is still burning and trees have come down on the road. You have to find somewhere else to go until the road is opened. So what does this actually mean for you? Here you are, you've gone off to work, there's been an extreme day. I'm just going to launch a poll at this stage to ascertain your level of preparedness or preparation in this regard. So here we are. There's a couple of questions here. 3 questions, I think, in actual fact. So here we are. It was an average Wednesday in summer. Would you be at home, work, or on holiday? And if you cast your mind back to last summer, would you have been prepared to spend a few nights away from home in an emergency like this? And finally, did you have an emergency kit packed with you, with clothes or important documents, phones or a phone or medicines before you left? So if you could respond to those. Fantastic. I'm going to end the polling now and we'll share those results and have a bit of a debrief around those. Look, the majority of you would have been at home on an average Wednesday in summer. That's fine. You would have been, all of you would have been prepared to stay a few nights away from home in an emergency situation like this. And the critical factor here is question 3, that you did not have an emergency kit packed, okay? So that's the missing link. So the learning from this particular exercise, that as we move forward, we know now to have an emergency kit ready. An emergency kit contains the all-important battery-operated radio, as I mentioned earlier, a blanket, water, maybe a set of clothes that can be worn to protect you from that radiant heat, just as we mentioned at the animation at the beginning. Important medications, both for yourself and your pets. You can probably have a torch in there, a mobile phone, a memory stick containing important documents. There's all this information is contained in the resource pack, the Leaving Early template that's available for you to download at the end of this presentation. So they're the critical learnings. I'm going to stop sharing that one now and close that, and I suggest you do the same. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to just change the scenario just very slightly. And what we're going to do is say that, okay, it's the same day, and this is part of that hypothetical situation again, same day, except this time when you jump on the Vic Emergency app, you see that the fire is still a way away. So you think you've got a bit of time, you know, that sort of yellow triangle hasn't kind of got as far as your place yet. So you think it's okay. You've got enough time to run home and grab some important stuff, you know, that important stuff that you meant to get ready, but you haven't got around to doing, okay? So you drive home, but as you get out the car on your driveway, so you've got home, you're on your drive, okay? You can smell smoke, and you can it's really getting windy now. The wind's really picked up, and it's excruciatingly hot. What you do then is you switch to your mobile phone and you check the app again. You see the little yellow triangle. It's still on your screen, but it's still an advice message. It hasn't been escalated yet. You should have enough time, you think to yourself. So you run around frantically around the house, and you're grabbing all the important things and start running through that checklist in your mind and then running them out to the car. And every now and then you check on your phone to see if you've been told to evacuate, but still nothing's been said. So you reckon you've got enough time. You're running through all the running through all the information in your head. You know, I've got my photos, I've got my birth certificate, I've got the medication that the doctor put me on. And this whole process is taking much longer than you thought. The next time that you go out to the car, you notice small patches of smoke coming up from the garden bed and from that pile of leaves that you've been meaning to rake up. Another one of those jobs that should have been done. Embers, as we mentioned earlier, embers have started falling near your home. It's at this point that you feel that surge of adrenaline pump through your body and that sense that you're out of time. My question to you in this scenario is, what is the one thing that you could have done differently? And pop that into the chat function. What is the one thing that you could have done differently in this scenario? And while you're offering your responses there, you know, there's a lot more riding on this than perhaps you would think. Where are the kids? Where are those vulnerable members of the community that we all like to look after, that cohesive element, the factor that I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation this morning, which is we live in a very community connected space, particularly our small rural townships. What about those vulnerable people? What about Auntie Gladys or Flo that lives next door? Who's looking after her? What's her plan? Has she left? Is she still in the house? What about the horses, the sheep, the animals? All these are important considerations. Which way out am I going to go down the road? Is the road going to be blocked? Do I stay at home and try and fight these small ember fires with my hose pipe? And you know, the interesting fact here is that this is a hypothetical situation. We've just made this up. And can you sense the amount of stress that it's creating in you just to have a response for each one of these things, a solution? Preparation has to be the key. One of the things that you could have done differently, and I'll just check my chat before I offer any more responses here. One thing that could have been done more differently, and the chat's not coming up for me, but that's okay, is look, preparation, that dreaded P word. Preparation is the key. Be prepared. You could have got home, had that emergency bag, grabbed it, off you go, ample time, less stress. You may well have decided in the morning, knowing that it was an extreme day, to have that bag with you when you left, so there was no need to come home. So as you can see, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but certainly preparation, having that fire plan, knowing what everyone is going to be doing, your immediate family and neighbors and community, is crucial for a good outcome when it comes to fire safety. Let's get that into our heads, that it's all about being out of harm's way. Leave the fire to do its thing. Let the professionals take care of fire maintenance and fire control. We need to be out of harm's way. Enact your fire plan, enact it early, know the triggers that you're going to use, and be out of harm's way. This is a summary of some of the key take-home messages from that part of our presentation. We're probably about 2/3 of the way through the presentation. I thank you for your ongoing patience as we go through some of these really important factors when it comes to fire behaviour. I'd like to just launch a poll now before we get into the next session. So I will just do that very quickly. And the next poll is entitled, oh no, that's okay. We'll leave that till the end. Actually, that's fine, no problem. Okay, I'm gonna close that there. Okay, the main take-home message is have that Vic Emergency app downloaded on your phone if you haven't got it already. If there's nothing else that you do following this presentation, get the Vic Emergency app. Learn how it works. We're happy to organise a bushfire planning workshop for you, and again, information will be available at the end of the presentation. Plan ahead. Stay safe during the summer. We have to make a mention to COVID-19. This horrible state of affairs is still around here. It's around with us, and it may well be around for some time longer. In the event of a fire, CFA advice is that you are allowed to leave a high fire risk area on the day of a high fire danger, provided if it's such that you're in isolation, make sure that wherever you move to, you continue that isolation and make others aware around you and maintain the COVID safe plan. And you may also travel for the purpose of preparing your property for the fire season. The best laid plans can fail. And what we need to do in that situation is always have a level of preparedness when it comes to our personal preparation. When we talk about personal preparation, it's everything that my early animation showed on radiant heat. The need to protect yourself from the, I suppose, invisible nature of radiant heat, its intensity, which I know a lot of you may have come to know that 2 kilowatt heat output from a campfire, and you have to move away. Imagine that 100-fold, if not more, when we talk about 100 kilowatts. It's excruciatingly intense, okay? So the maximum protection from natural fiber clothing, and these could be components of your emergency bag, and should be components of your emergency bag. Having the hat, eye protection as maximum coverage of skin. The human physiology is not designed to withstand heat. And you saw the graphic depictions around sort of the skin blistering and burning, and of course, cognitive impairment, the inability to think straight and consequently heat stroke. We also mentioned radiant heat and its ability to pass through glass, and the only form of protection is generally behind or inside solid objects. And remember, stay away from glass that may break or shatter in the event of radiant heat passing through it. We often talk about seeking refuge in water courses. So water courses such as rivers, a nearby dam, a swimming pool. And of course, in the event of an emergency, and if you are caught out, this might be your only form of survival or chances of survival away from the intensity of both ember attack, radiant heat, and of course, direct flame damage to your property. We have included there a stationary car. The CFA does not advocate seeking refuge in a stationary vehicle of any kind, but if it's the only option and you have to, then there are certain things that you can do to make sure you optimize your survival chances. One of them, first of all, is to have the car, if it's mobile, have it parked in a burnt area, a darkened area of land, away from a highway, away from a side road. And the reason for that is that you do not want to be an impediment or impede the traffic of emergency vehicles that might be trying to get to the fire. And you don't want to cause a collision or hindrance of any kind or risk your own life. So away from the highway. Make sure you leave the lights on. Make sure also that you have the bulkhead or the engine or the engine compartment facing the fire as an extra block, if you like, of heat for heat prevention getting to you. You get down below the window line. You cover yourself with the blanket. Remember not to wet the blanket with water. This could actually, if you do that, this will cause intense burns as the fire intensifies. So a dry blanket, have water bottled with you to maintain your hydration. Get down low, and of course the fire will pass, and as it passes, move out, view from underneath your blanket, move out of the vehicle and seek refuge in another burnt area, but monitor fire progress because of wind direction change, etc. Cars are designed to get you from A to B. They're not designed for you to seek refuge. And I, for one, can't think of a more intense place to seek refuge during the fire activity day. There's a reference made there to neighborhood safer places, or what we call neighborhood places of last resort. And the interesting thing to note here that, or they're sometimes called bushfire places of last resort, they're denoted by that green sign, as you can see on the left-hand side there. It's quite interesting actually with Simpson, that Simpson could potentially be the future site of an NSP or neighborhood safer place site, and a review is underway at the moment. Currently, the nearest ones to Simpson are about 24 kilometers away in Cobden, and more precisely on Curdy Street, the median strip, and also in Timboon. And in Timboon, the location is the Timboon and District Hall. They are some distance away, granted. The interesting thing to note about neighborhood safer places is that they won't guarantee safety, and it won't be a comfortable experience. And by its very nature and its name, it is a place of last resort, only as a last resort. It'll offer you distance from the fire, and it'll offer you a level of protection from the radiant heat. But we'd rather you were not there. We would rather you'd enacted your fire plan early and had made the decision to leave early. I often show this slide to give our listeners and our viewers an idea of the different types of fire, the indiscriminate, the harsh reality of fire. Fire stops for no one, be it a grass fire, be it a bush fire. The intensity of the heat, the intensity of the smoke. And, fire behavior itself is a science, and we've just touched on the periphery of what fires are about. The bottom line, as we've tried to do in Fire Safety Essentials, is to show to you that radiant heat and ember attack are your biggest enemies when it comes to fire. Don't be in harm's way. Leave early. Enact your fire plan. This final slide before the final poll gives you an indication of some of the resources that are available to you and where to find them. And certainly the local CFA office will be more than happy through their community education division and community safety division to assist you further should you require any precise or particular types of information. I'm going to now launch the final poll. I thank you for your patience. And the final poll is really looking at an evaluation. And there are 2 questions that ask you about your understanding of fire now that you've seen this presentation, and also whether you would recommend this presentation to other members that live in a fire-prone area. So if you could just take a couple of seconds reviewing those questions and answering them honestly, I'd be very grateful. Fantastic. I'll now end the polling and share those results. Thank you very much for your responses there. This feedback goes back to our headquarters, and they will analyse the data that's received. I'm now going to stop sharing those results, close that poll, and as we go into the final couple of slides of this presentation, I just want to emphasise and bring home the clear messaging around here, which is that our brigades do work very hard. There's no doubt about that. I'm a member of the local brigade here in Woodford, and I know the dynamics that exist, and I know the resources, and I know the limitations of our brigades as well. Jonathan Hutton, who I've spoken to a number of times, is passionate about keeping the community safe. He would be your go-to person should you require further information, and he can have a direct link with me as well. So don't feel reserved. Feel free to contact Jonathan should you have any further questions in this regard. We acknowledge that some of the imagery may have been a bit too graphic and a bit harsh, and it may upset some people. We have a couple of support lines that are available for viewers and listeners to contact should they feel that they've been impacted by any of the content here. I thank you for your patience and understanding, and also thank you for your feedback during the course of this presentation. I look forward to coming down to Simpson in the future and talking to you personally as we become more free to do face-to-face communications. But in the meantime, I bid you farewell. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And I sincerely say, stay safe during this fire period and make sure that you have a level of preparation in place should a fire occur in your area. Many thanks once again.